Right, if you've seen part one, you know I've just finished wrapping up and renovating a 2-bedroom property in Newark. Bought it for £135,000. I spent just over £15,000 in renovation costs and it's been valued at £185,000. So if I were to sell it today, I'd walk away with a profit of over £30,000 minus any selling fees, which is just about an 18% return on investment. But I'm not selling it. I'm going to rent it out instead and refinance it using the BRRR strategy to pull most of my money back out. Let's go to my desk and I'll show you exactly how that works. Okay, fresh cup of tea. Let's look at these numbers. So this is where BRRR really comes into its own. It stands for buy, refurbish, rent and refinance. You buy a property that needs work, refurbish it to increase the value, rent it out so it produces income, and then refinance it at the new, higher value to pull most of your original cash back out. I'll go into the strategy in more detail in a totally separate video, but let me show you how the numbers worked for this one. So this is my property investment spreadsheet. I have talked about it on another video, but this is for now my completed property. I'm on the summary tab, and the original listing price of this property was £160,000. It was in Newark and Sherwood. I ended up buying it for £135,000, which is a nearly 16% discount. I ended up holding it for 6 months doing the refurbishment work, which is longer than I wanted, but a couple of personal and family issues cropped up. And now it's recently been valued at £185,000, which is a £50,000 value add to what I bought it for in the first place. But how much of that is my profit? Because I run this through my limited company, I will pay a 19% tax on the profit. I was looking for at least a 10% gross profit on the property value itself. I have no refurbishment cost buffer anymore because I know exactly what I spent on the refurbishment. And because I do run this through my limited company, I can reclaim VAT back on a lot of the spends that I had during the refurbishment. And if you're thinking about running it through a limited company or whether you want to do it in your personal name, watch this video I'll link up here where I explain the difference between the two. But now to get into the real numbers of what I spent. I had total closing costs of £5,350, which is stamp duty of just over £4,000 and then £1,300 of solicitor fees. Because I held it for 6 months, I had nearly £1,500 of holding costs, so that's council tax, utility and insurance. I purchased it cash outright for £135,000. In BRRR, you either tend to buy it in cash or through a bridging loan, but I went with cash. And then refurbishment costs, actually, before my VAT reclaim, came to £15,500-ish. But I managed to reclaim 20% or so of that back, so that is £12,500 of refurbishment costs, which brings my total spend out my own pocket to £154,000. And then if I were to sell it, I'd have to pay fees of £3,150, which is estate agent fees and solicitor fees again. And considering the property is now being valued at £185,000, that means my gross profit if I were to sell it would be £27,500, which is nearly 15% return, which is pretty good, especially just for 6 months. But that is gross and I have to apply tax to that, nearly £6,000, and my net profit would be nearly £22,000, which again, pretty good. So my ROI, if I were to consider this a flip, would be nearly 18%. But let's jump into the broken down costs then. Solicitor fees and stamp duty I've mentioned, my holding fees of council tax, utilities and insurance, my estate agent selling fees, they said 1% if I were to sell with them, plus solicitor fees again, and then I purchased the property in cash. So those are all my purchase and financing costs. But when it came to the refurbishment, these were my costs, and feel free to pause the video here and take a look through what I spent. But one thing I want to jump into straight away is the amount of labour costs that I had. In total, I had nearly £5,000 of labour costs because I needed professional plasterer, professional boiler installation, electrical work, so that was the consumer unit change and then the certificate as well. I had some help with the painting, so I had someone help me out and I paid them. I had the front door professionally installed and then professional tiling too. So this is all either qualified work that's required or finishing work to make the property look good. But aside from that, the main purchases were the IKEA kitchen. This ended up being cheaper than I initially said in my other video because I bought the appliances from elsewhere, not IKEA. The bathroom suite and the carpet, they were pretty expensive, but they do add a decent amount of value, both of them. And I think I got an absolute bargain on buying an X-Demo composite door, which was £600 off greendoors.co.uk. Massively recommend them. That would have been at least £1,000, probably £1,500 by itself. And luckily, the lift that was in the property that went through from the kitchen to the second bedroom, I put that on eBay and I managed to get someone to buy it for £1,000 in cash. But then that £1,000 went pretty much the next day on plastering work. But not bad that it came with the property. So that's what it took to take this property from what I bought it for £135,000 to what it's valued at £185,000. 6 months and all of this cost. So let's talk about refinancing. So these are the first two steps of purchasing a property through BRRR. You buy the property and you refurbish it. But for renting and refinancing, that's on this final tab on the spreadsheet here. Now I had it valued for rental and the estate agent came round expecting it to be £800 a month. But then she looked at the property, thought it was really nice, was very complimentary, and she said that she reckons we'd actually be able to get £900 a month instead. And so she's listed it at £900 2 days ago. We've already had 8 viewings booked. So I'm putting in £900 here because 8 viewings, I'm fairly confident we should get that. Their management fee is 10%, so £90 a month. And then I'm seeking a 10% ROI for the net return and a 7% gross annual yield. So that's the rental. But for the refinancing side of things, this gets a little bit more tricky. So I have a post-refurbishment value of £185,000, which would be a £27,500 flip profit if I were to flip it. And I can refinance 75% of that value back to me, so as released equity. So that's £138,750. Now, if I bought this property through a bridging loan rather than cash, that money would also be used to pay off the bridging loan, and the difference in between the two is what you'd get back. Now, with the mortgage deal I went for, it's a 2-year tracker at 4.84%, and because I run it through a limited company, it's a little bit more expensive on the product fees, the percentage, and the interest rate, and it's £4,371 product fee. But as it's a tracker, and I feel like the market may go down in the future, I think this should get cheaper over time than the £560 a month I will start paying. Now, it's important to say this mortgage is interest only, which means I'm not paying down the loan itself, just the interest. It's pretty standard for investment properties, but it does mean I need an exit strategy in the future. So whether that's selling, refinancing again, or something else entirely. I talk about that more in my interest only versus repayment video that I'll link up here. So monthly, my gross cash flow, because of the rent, minus the fees, minus the insurance costs too, minus the monthly mortgage payment, should be £229.50 back in my pocket gross. And annually, that's £2,750-ish. Applying tax to that, that's £2,230. And for the total cash that I've left invested in this property, so by total cash left invested, I mean the £154,500 I spent, minus the £138,750 I am mortgaging back out. That leaves £15,000 of my own money in the property, but I'm getting £229.50 a month gross, £2,230 a year net, giving me a gross ROI of 17.6% and a net ROI of 14.29%, which is pretty damn good. And if we talk about the gross annual yield on the invested value, that's a 7% yield, which is pretty much exactly what I was seeking. And the yield is still pretty strong even on the refinance value too, 5.84%, so that's not bad. And it comfortably passes the stress test too, which is a must for financing right now. Now, BRRR isn't passive, it takes time, especially during the refurb phase, but it gives you control, better cash use, and serious momentum. You end up with a better property, generating income, and you've still got most of your capital ready to go again. And honestly, overall, I think this one turned out to be a really solid deal. I added around 50k in value, pulled nearly 139k of that back out, and ended up with a modern, well-finished rental producing over £2,200 a year net with just about 15.6k left invested. And that's before even factoring in the capital growth which this house should have, which over time can quietly add thousands of pounds more to the picture. Hopefully that gives you an honest and clear insight into the kind of investments that I like to make. Simple, solid, and focused on long-term growth. If you want to see how I found this deal in the first place, check out this video over here. And please subscribe if you found this useful. Catch you in the next one.